It's wonderful to see you all again. I've got an extraordinary tale to tell you today.
Your mother's little workshop is sitting on $480,000 of real estate, and she's using it to glue old books. That was my son-in-law, Grant Ellison Price, sitting in my kitchen at 7:30 on a Sunday evening, drinking my coffee, wearing a shirt with his initials embroidered on the cuffs. He said it to Meredith as if I were not standing 6 feet away, rinsing his mug, as if the woman who built that workshop board by board had evaporated from the room. The mug was Robert's, a cream-colored ceramic piece with a hairline crack along the handle that I had repaired with gold lacquer in 2016, the year after he died. Japanese kintsugi, the art of making the broken thing more beautiful than the original. Robert would have laughed at the metaphor. I was standing in my own kitchen, washing the mug of the man I loved, while the man my daughter married calculated the value of my life's work per square foot. My kitchen, my workshop, my name on every deed and every invoice for 34 years. But what they did not know was that I had been listening. Not just that night, for months. And what happened 14 months later in a Charleston County courtroom would make Grant lose the color in his face. But I will get to that. First, let me tell you how a 64-year-old widow ended up proving that the woman they dismissed as furniture had been building a case with the same patience she used to restore a 200-year-old book. Before I go on, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story hits close to home. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I would love to know where you are listening from. I need to tell you how I got here. How a 64-year-old widow who spent 34 years building something real ended up being treated like a tenant in her own business, by her own blood. My name is Ruth Anne Calloway. I was born in Beaufort County, South Carolina in 1961. My grandfather, James Henry Odom, was a self-taught bookbinder. He repaired hymnals for black churches across the Lowcountry. Baptist, AME, Pentecostal. He did not care about denomination. He cared about the spines. His shed smelled of hide glue and cedar shavings. The light came through a single window that faced east, and in the mornings the sawdust would float through the sunbeam like gold powder. I would sit on an overturned crate and watch his hands. A book with a broken spine, he told me when I was 9 years old, watching him stitch signatures with a curved needle, is a story that cannot hold itself up. He handed me the needle. Our job is to make it stand again. He gave me my first bone folder that year, a smooth, flat tool carved from actual bone, ivory-colored, worn thin at the edges from decades of creasing. I still have it. It sits in the top drawer of my workbench. No one else has ever used it. I studied library science at the College of Charleston. I married Robert Calloway at 27. He was an electrician with steady hands and a steady heart. The kind of man who came home every night and asked what I was working on, and actually listened to the answer. We bought a small house in Mount Pleasant in 1990 for $118,000. We had Meredith the next year. She was curious as a child. At 7 years old, she would sit on the workshop floor and sort my leather scraps by color. She once asked me why I talked to the books while I worked. I told her I was listening to what they needed. She nodded as if that made perfect sense. Robert supported every dollar I put into the bindery. He understood that craft is not a hobby, it is a calling. When Robert died of pancreatic cancer in 2015, the diagnosis came on a Tuesday and he was gone by Thanksgiving. 54 years old. The kitchen table where we ate every supper was suddenly the place where I signed the death certificate. I remember the pen, a blue ballpoint from the funeral home. I remember the sound it made on the paper, a sound like a door shutting that you cannot reopen. The house was so quiet after that. I would walk through the rooms and hear the floor creak in places where Robert used to stand. The workshop was the only place where the silence did not feel empty because the work filled it. His life insurance was $175,000. Every financial advisor told me to invest it in the market. I invested it in my workshop. New equipment, climate-controlled storage for the consignment inventory. A Vandercook proof press I found at an estate sale in Savannah for $14,000. I installed the new shelving myself on a Saturday in March 2016. My hands bled from the brackets. Robert would have done it in half the time, but he would have been proud that I did it at all. The workshop was not just my business. It was the last conversation I was still having with Robert, because every improvement I made was something we had talked about together. I could hear him in the walls, in the heart pine floors, in the way the morning light hit the proof press at exactly 8:15. But what I did not realize then, and this is what haunts me at 3 a.m, was that my daughter had been watching those investments. Not with pride, with arithmetic. And what happens when a child starts doing arithmetic on a parent's grief is something I wish no one ever had to learn. March 2022. Meredith and Grant had been married 2 years. Grant's real estate license had been suspended the previous fall for undisclosed liens on 3 properties he brokered in Mount Pleasant. He told everyone it was a regulatory technicality. Meredith told me it was industry politics. I found the actual suspension notice later, in a stack of mail he left on my workshop desk. It used the word fraudulent twice. Meredith called me on a Tuesday at 6:45 in the evening. "Mom, Grant has an idea for the workshop." She said it the way she said everything, bright, upbeat, like a gift I should be grateful for. "What kind of idea?" "He thinks the front room would make an incredible event space. Private dinners, gallery nights. Imagine Instagram." I was hand-sewing a first-edition Faulkner that a collector in Savannah had trusted me with, a 1929 copy of The Sound and the Fury. Loose front board, foxing across the end papers. The client was paying $4,200 for the restoration. "Meredith, the front room is where I do intake and appraisals." "That is exactly the point. You could do that in the back. The back is climate-controlled storage." "Details, Mom. Details. $480,000 of workshop, 34 years of reputation. A client list that included Sotheby's, Christie's, and the Gibbs Museum. I appreciate Grant's thinking, but the workshop works the way it is." She sighed. "You always do this. Close doors before they open. Dad would have said yes." Robert would not have said yes. Robert would have asked Grant to produce a balance sheet and watched the man's face collapse. But I did not say that. That was the first boundary. Polite, clear, and completely ignored within 60 days. I was still counting that as a disagreement. I had no idea what a disagreement really looked like in my daughter's vocabulary. Because what she did next was not a disagreement. It was a takeover. June 2022. Meredith asked if Grant could use the office at the workshop while he got his license situation sorted. Just a desk, just a few hours a day. I had a small office behind the binding room. A wooden desk Robert built me in 2004, a filing cabinet, and a window that looked out over a magnolia tree. I said yes, because she was my daughter, because saying no to your child feels like pulling a thread that unravels something you spent decades weaving. Grant moved in. Not a desk, 2 monitors, a wireless printer, and a phone that rang constantly with calls he took outside. I noticed the way he touched things in the workshop, carefully, reverently, not because he respected them, but the way a man touches things he never had growing up. His monitors stayed on my desk for the next 8 months. By July, he had rearranged the filing cabinet to make room for his own folders. I found business cards in the desk drawer. Grant Price, Creative Director, Calloway Bindery. I had not approved that title. He had never asked. By August, he was answering the workshop phone. "Calloway Bindery, this is Grant." The first time I heard it, I was in the binding room stitching a folio. I stopped mid-stitch. Clients who had worked with me for 15 years were suddenly speaking to a man who could not tell the difference between vellum and cardstock. In September, a collector named Helen Ashford called me directly on my cell phone. I was at the workbench repairing a Victorian photo album when the phone buzzed. "Ruth, who is the man answering your phone?" "I'm handling it, Helen. He tried to quote me $7,000 for a rebinding that you and I both know is a $2,800 job." "I have been your client for 12 years. I confronted Meredith that evening at 8:15. "Your husband is quoting double on my restorations. He's trying to help you charge what you are worth, Mom. You undervalue yourself. I have been pricing restorations for 34 years. And maybe that is the problem." That was the firm boundary. I told her Grant needed to stop answering my phone. She nodded, said of course. Grant answered the phone again 3 days later. In October, I discovered the insurance policy had been changed. My workshop insurance, the policy I had carried through State Farm since 2006, had been altered to add Grant as an additional insured party. I had not signed anything. The agent told me the change was requested by your business partner. I do not have a business partner. Ma'am, we have a signed authorization form on file, dated September 19th. The signature was mine, but I did not sign it. I felt something shift inside my chest. Not a break, something colder. The sound of a door closing on every excuse I had ever made for my daughter. That night I told Meredith the insurance change was unauthorized and would be reversed. She said Grant must have misunderstood the paperwork. I knew what a misunderstanding looked like. This was not one. And what I found next would make that forged signature look like a warm-up exercise. November 2022, 11 at night. The shop was empty. The magnolia outside the office window was bare. I was repairing a 1923 first edition of Cain by Jean Toomer, a book worth $28,000 in restored condition. My hands knew the work. They had known it since I was 9. But my mind was on the insurance form with my forged signature, on Grant's monitors still sitting on my desk. On my daughter's voice saying maybe that is the problem, like 34 years of expertise were an inconvenience. I opened the top drawer of my workbench. My grandfather's bone folder was there, ivory-colored, smooth, unchanged. Next to it was a small spiral notebook I had started 2 weeks earlier. $4.29 at the CVS on King Street. I opened it to the first page. Entry 1. October 28, 2022. Insurance authorization forged with my signature. Entry 2. October 30, 2022. Grant quoted Helen Ashford $7,000 for a $2,800 rebinding. Entry 3. November 2, 2022. Meredith asked for copies of my client list for marketing purposes. I gave her a decoy list with 12 names. The real list has 147 active clients. Entry 4. November 9, 2022. Found Grant's browser history. Searches for commercial property appraisal Charleston SC and converting artisan workshop to event venue zoning. I was not writing a diary. I was building a file. Every entry was a brick. Every brick was dated. Entry 5. November 14, 2022. Overheard Grant on the phone in the parking lot. The old woman doesn't even know what she's sitting on. We just need to get her to sign the partnership papers. Entry 6. November 22, 2022. Meredith told Helen Ashford that Mom is stepping back from client-facing work. I was not stepping back. I was not consulted. Entry 7. December 3, 2022. Grant changed the letterhead on the workshop printer. New version reads Calloway and Bindery. I did not approve this. I saved the original and the modified version. Here is what I have learned about invisibility. When you become invisible, people stop performing. They stop filtering. They say things in front of you they would never say if they remembered you were standing right there. And I was standing right there, listening to every word, photographing every document, writing it all down in a $4 notebook. That night I sat at my kitchen table in the dark. I had a conversation with Robert, not out loud, in my head, the way I had been talking to him since the day he died. I told him what was happening. I told him our daughter was trying to steal my business. I told him I missed having someone in the house who remembered that the workshop was mine before it was anyone else's idea of an investment. I told him about the bone folder, how it was still in the same drawer where I put it the day we moved into the workshop in 1991. How some mornings I open that drawer just to touch it, just to feel something that has not changed. The cup of chamomile tea in my hands was warm. The house was quiet. I could hear the clock in the hallway. The same clock Robert wound every Sunday night for 22 years. I do not know if the dead can hear us. But I know that talking to Robert that night was the moment I decided to stop waiting for my daughter to see me, and start making it impossible for her not to. If you have ever been the person cooking, fixing, holding everything together while they treated you like furniture, You know exactly what that clarity feels like. It does not feel like anger. It feels like arrival. Even I did not know what would come next, but my notebook did. January 2023. Grant came to me with a leather portfolio, a Mont Blanc pen clipped to the front. Ruth, we need to talk about the future of the bindery. Meredith and I have been doing some projections. He opened the portfolio. Inside was a 42-page business plan. Calloway and Price Creative Collective, an artisan event space and luxury restoration experience. My 34-year-old business was being rebranded as an experience. This is not your business to rebrand, Grant. It could be 50-50 partnership. We bring the marketing, you bring the craft. 50-50, you want half my business. Our projections show a 300% revenue increase in 18 months. Your projections, the same projections you used for the 3 properties with undisclosed liens. His smile held. That was a different situation. Get out of my office. He stood up slowly, picking up the portfolio with the careful precision of a man who believed he was being patient with a difficult old woman. Meredith wants what is best for you. Meredith wants what is mine. That was the consequence warning, clear, direct, unmistakable. 3 weeks later, Meredith called, not to apologize, to escalate. Mom, Grant is hurt. He was trying to help. He was trying to take half my business. The bindery grossed $142,000 last year and you spent $130,000 on supplies. That is how a craft business works, Meredith. She paused. Then she said it. Dad's insurance money. You put all of it into the shop. $175,000. What about Dad's insurance money? That was family money, Mom. That was supposed to be for all of us. There it was. The math she had been doing since 2015. Her father's life insurance was not my investment in my career. It was her inheritance spent without her permission. I did not argue. I did not scream. I hung up the phone and drove to Constance Whaley's house on Trad Street. Constance opened the door in reading glasses and a cardigan, holding a glass of Maker's Mark. You look like a woman who finally brought me that folder. I had not told her about the folder. She had just known. 28 years of friendship teaches you to read a face. I handed her the notebook, the photographs, the forged insurance authorization, Grant's business plan. Constance read for 90 minutes without speaking. When she looked up, her bourbon was untouched. Ruth, how long has this been going on? 11 months. Why didn't you come to me sooner? Because she's my daughter, Constance. She is, and she's also committing fraud. Constance called it building the provenance. Provenance is the documented history of ownership. Every hand that touched a rare book, every sale, every auction, every library stamp. Without provenance, a book is just paper. Your business is the book, Constance told me. And they're trying to strip the provenance and sell the paper. I spent the next 8 months proving her right. And if you think the evidence I gathered was thorough, you are right. But what that evidence revealed about my own son-in-law was something even Constance had not expected. And what my own clients told me, unprompted, would become the testimony that ended his defense. I need to pause here for a second. If you have ever given everything to build something with your own hands and then watched someone in your own family try to take it apart, I already know you are still here. Because what comes next is the turning point. February through October 2023. 8 months of building the case. I felt something crack open inside me. Not pain. Relief. The relief of a woman who had carried a secret for 11 months and finally set the weight down. I documented everything. Every client invoice since 2008. Digital copies backed up to a USB drive in the fireproof safe. Photographs of every restoration project with dated metadata. Letters from Sotheby's, Christie's, and the Gibbs Museum confirming my work. A notarized statement from Martin Ose valuing my active inventory at $310,000. I also obtained Grant's real estate suspension records. The filing showed he had concealed $43,000 in liens across 3 properties. His buyers sued. He settled. The settlement was paid with money from his parents' retirement fund. This was the man who wanted half my business. Helen Ashford provided a written statement without me asking. She described Grant quoting her $7,000 for a $2,800 job, and then telling her that she should deal with Grant directly from now on, since Ruth is transitioning out of client services. I was not transitioning out of anything. He invented that. I carried a $38 digital recorder from Best Buy in the pocket of my work apron. I recorded 6 conversations in which Grant discussed liquidating the old inventory with Meredith. They never noticed. When you are invisible, people forget that invisible does not mean deaf. I also called Martin Osei in March. Martin, if someone were to sell items from a consignment inventory without the owner's knowledge, what would that look like? It would look like theft, Ruth. Why are you asking? I'm being careful. Be more than careful. Document everything. I was already documenting everything. That is what 34 years of cataloging rare manuscripts teaches you. You do not just record what is there. You record what is missing. Martin also gave me a notarized letter stating that any sale of consigned items without the consignor's written authorization constitutes conversion under South Carolina law. I kept that letter in the fireproof safe. It would become Exhibit E and things were going missing. In April, I noticed a gap in the consignment shelf. A set of hand-colored botanical prints from 1842. 4 prints. Consigned by David Chen. Appraised at $6,200. Gone. I checked the ledger. No sale recorded. No pickup noted. I photographed the empty shelf. David, have you picked up the Redoubt prints? No, are they ready? They've been moved, I'm locating them. I found them on eBay 3 days later, listed by a seller called CHSDN Estate Finds. Grant's account, listed at $3,800, below market, because Grant did not know what they were worth. That was the moment I stopped being his mother-in-law and started being his creditor. Constance and I spent the next 7 months building the legal framework. She filed preservation orders on the evidence. She retained a forensic accountant to trace Grant's eBay transactions. I kept documenting, every week, every entry. The notebook grew fat. November 14, 2023, a Tuesday evening, 5:15. The notebook had 94 entries. The USB drive contained 312 photographs, 47 scan documents, and 6 audio recordings. Constance reviewed the complete file in her dining room. She spread it across the mahogany table her grandmother had left her. The table smelled of lemon oil and old wood. She read for 2 hours. When she finished, she took off her glasses. Ruth, this is one of the most thorough cases I have seen in 30 years of practice. Every receipt, every photograph, every recording. She shook her head. It's airtight. 34 years of cataloging rare books, Constance. I know how to build provenance. Your daughter has no idea what she underestimated. If you are still with me, hit subscribe now, because this next part is the moment that changed everything. I placed a typed letter on Grant's desk. 3 pages. Not an emotional plea. A facts recital. Grant, between January 2022 and October 2023, you have taken the following actions without authorization. Altered my business insurance using a forged signature. Sold 4 consignment items valued at $6,200 through your personal eBay account. Quoted unauthorized prices to 3 clients totaling $12,400 in overcharges. Used the workshop office, utilities, and phone for 14 months. Estimated value, $8,600. Total documented unauthorized activity, $27,200. I have retained legal counsel. All evidence preserved in multiple locations. You have 72 hours to vacate the workshop office. I locked the workshop. I drove home. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea in the kitchen of the house Robert and I bought in 1990. My hands were shaking. The shaking had nothing to do with fear. It was relief, pure and sudden. After 14 months of being invisible in my own business, I had finally made myself impossible to ignore. They did not leave in 72 hours. They sued. December 2023. Meredith and Grant filed a constructive trust claim in Charleston County. They wanted 50% of Calloway Bindery and 50% of the Mount Pleasant house. Robert's life insurance was family capital, they claimed. Ruth had unilaterally invested without consulting her daughter. For a moment, I was not a 64-year-old woman reading a lawsuit. I was the girl sitting on an overturned crate in her grandfather's shed. He had steady hands, he never rushed. He told me once, "You cannot fix something if you are shaking." I put the summons down. I called Constance. They filed constructive trust. "Good," Constance said. "Good. Now they have to testify under oath, and everything they say will be on the record." March 2024, Charleston County Courthouse, 9:30 in the morning. Grant wore the tailored shirt. The Montblanc pen was clipped to his breast pocket. He spoke in projections and market valuations. He called the workshop an underperforming asset. He called my business a craft hobby subsidized by inheritance. He said the word scalable 4 times and growth hacking twice. Then Constance stood up. "Mr. Price, you filed this claim asserting that Robert Calloway's life insurance was family capital, correct?" "Yes, and you believe the returns should be shared with your wife. She's the daughter, the only child, it's only fair." "Is it fair?" Constance adjusted her glasses. "Are you aware that Robert Calloway's life insurance policy, number LI 4419SC, names a sole beneficiary?" Grant blinked. "Ruth Calloway, not the Calloway family, not Ruth and Meredith. Ruth Anne Calloway, sole and exclusive. That's a technicality. It's a legal designation, and you're a real estate professional. You know the difference." Constance placed Exhibit A on the table, the insurance policy. She let the silence hold for 3 full seconds before speaking again. Exhibit B, 12 years of tax returns showing the bindery's revenue and expenses. Every dollar documented. Every supply receipt filed. 12 years of a woman building something with her hands while the man across the aisle built nothing but projections. Exhibit C, the forged insurance authorization with Grant's fingerprints on the original form. "Your Honor, I would also like to enter Exhibit D, Grant's eBay account. CHSDN estate finds. 4 consignment items sold without my knowledge. David Chen's botanical prints. Value, $6,200. Sale price, $3,800. Mr. Price, do you recognize this eBay seller account?" Grant's smile disconnected. The bolts came loose. "I was helping Ruth liquidate slow-moving inventory." "Did Ruth ask you to sell these items?" "Not specifically, but did you inform her?" "I plan to." "Did you deposit the proceeds into the business account?" Silence. "Mr. Price, I put it in my personal account temporarily." "Temporarily for 7 months." Constance placed the digital recorder transcripts on the table. 6 conversations, dated, time-stamped, transcribed. In recording number 4, dated July 12, 2023, Grant Price states, and I quote, she read it slowly, "Once we get the trust claim filed, the old woman won't have a choice. She'll settle. She always gives in. That's what she does." The courtroom was silent. Meredith stood up behind Grant. "That's not, he didn't mean." "Sit down, Miss Price," the judge said. Meredith sat. She was staring at Grant, not at Constance, not at me, at her husband. And then she leaned forward and said, loud enough for the court reporter to hear, "Grant, stop lying." "Just stop, she's my mother." Grant turned to her. His face went white. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling you to stop." The defense attorney asked for a recess. The judge granted 15 minutes. Grant and Meredith did not speak to each other during those 15 minutes. I watched them from across the hallway. She stood by the window. He stood by the water fountain, 12 feet apart. After the recess, Grant took the stand again. His voice was different now. The polish was gone. Constance asked one question. "Mr. Price, did you ever consider asking Ruth for permission to use her business assets?" Grant looked at me. For the first time in the entire trial, he looked directly at me, and then he slipped. "She would have said no." "Why do you believe that?" "Because she always says no. That workshop, the inventory, the house, it's all just sitting there." His voice was rising. "She could be making 10 times what she makes, but she won't change. She won't modernize. She won't let anyone in." He was shaking now. His hands were flat on the witness box. "I grew up watching my parents lose everything, every business, every house, every car repossessed. And when I looked at that workshop, I thought, this time I can make it work. This time I won't lose." He stopped. He heard himself. He had just admitted, under oath, that he took from me because he felt entitled to what was mine. His wound was real. But a wound does not excuse what you do with the knife. Constance did not need to say anything else. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, forgery is not a family disagreement. Selling consigned property is not a family disagreement. And calling a 64-year-old master artisan, the old woman, while planning to force her out of a business she built over 34 years, is not a family disagreement. It is exploitation. The courtroom was still. The judge dismissed the constructive trust claim. Judgment against Grant, $27,200 in restitution. Criminal referral for the forged insurance authorization. Grant's name removed from business insurance immediately. Protective order barring Grant and Meredith from the workshop. I stood. My legs were steady. My hands were still. Meredith found me in the hallway. Her mascara was running. Her hands were shaking. Mom, you recorded us. I documented the evidence, Meredith, the same way I document every book. With dates, photographs, and provenance. Why didn't you just talk to me? I did talk to you. In January 2022, I said no to the event space. In August 2022, I told you to keep Grant off my phone. In October 2022, I reported the forged signature. In January 2023, I told Grant to get out of my office. You did not listen to any of it. You treated every boundary I set as a suggestion. She stared at me. Dad would never have done this. Your father would have done exactly this. The difference is you never would have tried it with him because you respected him. That landed. I watched it land. Her chin trembled. When he died, I thought the money was supposed to take care of both of us. It did take care of both of us. It built a business that was going to be yours someday. All you had to do was wait and learn and respect the work. She turned and walked down the corridor. Grant followed her. His Mont Blanc pen was gone. He must have left it at the defense table. I did not pick it up. My phone buzzed that evening. 17 missed calls, 9 texts from Meredith, 4 from Grant, 2 from numbers I did not recognize. I did not open any of them. I went home. I sat on the porch in Mount Pleasant. The rocking chair creaked under me the same way it had for 35 years. The sun was setting over the harbor. A bell buoy clanged somewhere past the bridge, slow and steady, like a metronome. The air was cooling against my bare arms, and it smelled of salt marsh and jasmine. I did not feel triumph. I felt something heavier. The weight of knowing that the person who had tried to take my business was the same person I had taught to tie her shoes. Some victories leave you emptier than the fight. I poured myself a glass of water. The glass was one Robert and I had bought at a yard sale in 1993. Plain, clear, the kind of glass nobody notices until it is the only one left in the cabinet. I held it up to the last of the light. No cracks. Some things survive everything. 2 weeks after the trial, Grant sent me a text at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. Ruth, we didn't mean for it to go this far. Family doesn't sue family. You could have just said something. We thought you were happy with the arrangement. I read the message twice. Happy with the arrangement. The arrangement where he forged my signature, stole my inventory, and called me the old woman on a recorded phone call. I put the phone down. I finished my tea. I did not respond. Some messages answer themselves. 3 days later, another text. This is Grant. I know you're angry, but we can still fix this without lawyers. Call me. I saved it. I did not call. Constance asked, does it bother you, the texts? No, I said. What bothers me is that he still thinks there is something to negotiate. That is a man who has never been told no by a woman and believed it. April 2024. Meredith called, not to argue, not to blame, to ask. Mom, can we talk? Yes. She came to the house on a Saturday morning at 10. No Range Rover, a used Honda Civic, no linen blazer. A sweater I recognized from 3 Christmases ago. She sat at the kitchen table and looked at her hands. I want to know if there's a way back. I looked at her for a long time, then I told her. 1, Grant is never to set foot in my workshop again, not as a visitor, not as a guest. Never. 2, the $27,200 judgment will be paid in full. Every cent returned. 3, if you want to learn this business, you start at the workbench, not the office. You learn to stitch a spine before you learn to price one. She was quiet. And 4 is the hardest one. You call David Chen and you apologize for the prints your husband stole from my consignment shelf, to his face, not by text. I can do that. Can you or will you? She looked at me. I will. Then we start there. She did not hug me. That would have been too easy, too clean. She nodded. She stood up. She left. That was the beginning, not the end. Forgiveness is not something you ask for once and receive. It is something you earn with 100 small choices over 100 ordinary days. March 2025, 16 months after the trial. I am in my workshop at 7 in the morning. The magnolia outside the office window is blooming. The heart pine floors Robert and I laid in 2003 are warm under my feet. Grant was convicted of forgery in June 2024. 18 months probation. $27,200 in restitution. A permanent record that ended any hope of his real estate license being reinstated. His letters sit in a drawer in my kitchen, unopened. I do not owe him an answer, I owe myself peace. Meredith filed for divorce in September 2024. She works at a gallery on King Street now, front desk, $18 an hour. She comes to the workshop on Saturday mornings. I am teaching her to repair bindings. Her stitches are uneven. Her paste is too wet. Last Saturday, she was working on a water-damaged hymnal from a church in Somerville. She held the bone folder wrong 3 times. I corrected her without speaking. I just moved her hand. She looked at me. Is that how Grandpa James taught you? I nodded. She went back to work. She shows up every week. That matters more than technique. Technique can be learned. Showing up is a choice. David Chen called last month. Meredith had visited him at his home in West Ashley. She apologized in person. Brought a handwritten letter. He told me. Ruth, she looked nervous, but she stayed for 40 minutes and did not make excuses. She also asked me about the prints. She wanted to know the artist's name and the history of the collection. That was the first time Meredith had ever asked about the work itself, not the price. The work. I placed my grandfather's bone folder back in the top drawer. I hung Robert's kintsugi mug on the hook above the sink, where it catches the morning light through the east window. I put the tortoiseshell clip back in my hair, the one my mother gave me in 1981, the year I started college. Every object returned to where it belonged. I held onto them the way my grandfather held onto his tools, by never once letting go. Elijah sent me a drawing last week, a book with wings. He drew it at school during free art period. He came to the workshop last Saturday while Meredith was practicing her stitching. He sat on the floor in the corner, cross-legged, sorting my leather scraps by color. The same spot, the same scraps, the same quiet concentration his mother showed at that age. He looked up at me and said, Nana Ruth, do the books talk to you? I almost dropped the bone folder. Sometimes, I said, when I listen. On the back of the drawing in pencil it says, for Nana Ruth. Books can fly because you fix them. It is taped to my workshop lamp, right next to my grandfather's bone folder. Every time I look at it, I think maybe the crease in the spine does not have to mean the story is over. Last Tuesday night, I stayed late at the workshop. I was repairing a 1938 first edition of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. The spine was cracked. The boards were loose. The gilt on the title was nearly gone. I worked slowly. Bone folder in my right hand, linen thread in my left. The workshop smelled of wheat paste and old paper and something I can only describe as patience. People ask me sometimes if I regret the lawsuit, if I could have handled it differently, kept it quiet, let it go. Here is what I tell them. My daughter looked at 34 years of my work and saw real estate. My son-in-law forged my signature, stole my inventory, and called me the old woman while planning to take my business. There was nothing to keep quiet. There was only the truth, and the truth needed provenance. My grandfather used to say that a book does not care who broke it. It only cares about the hands that put it back together. I think that is true for people too. You cannot control who damages you. You can only control whether you let the damage define you or whether you pick up the bone folder and get back to work. My workshop, my hands, my name on the door, Calloway Bindery, established 1991, still standing.
I hope you enjoyed this tale. Please subscribe to support the channel. Goodbye for now.